My name is Calista Wynn. I was 25 when everything changed, though at the time I thought I was only bringing my husband lunch. It was a Tuesday, the kind that doesn't announce itself. I remember the light, thin, autumn gold, slanting through the kitchen window while I packed a paper bag with the sandwiches I'd made that morning. Turkey and Swiss for Julian, the way he liked it cut on the diagonal because he once told me, half joking, that food tasted better that way. 3 years of marriage had taught me which small gestures made him smile, and I collected them like coins. We'd met at a mutual friend's gallery opening, both of us pretending to understand the art, both relieved to find someone else faking it. He was an operations manager at a logistics firm downtown, methodical and quiet, the kind of man who alphabetized his bookshelf and never raised his voice. I worked as a records analyst for a nonprofit, cataloging things other people forgot to keep track of. We fit together the way people do, when neither one is trying too hard. That morning, I'd woken up with an unexpected softness in my chest, the kind that makes you want to do something small and kind for no occasion at all. His birthday was 2 days away, but I decided I didn't want to wait. I wanted to see his face when I walked into that glass lobby unannounced, wanted to watch surprise become delight. I took the train downtown, the sandwich bag warm against my palm, rehearsing nothing in particular, just humming along to whatever song had been stuck in my head since morning. The city moved around me the way it always did, indifferent and enormous, and I felt, briefly, like the luckiest person in it. His building rose 14 stories of tinted glass, the lobby all marble and hush. I'd been there before, company holiday parties, the afternoon he'd forgotten his laptop and I delivered it, breathless, before a client call. I knew the security guard by sight, an older man named Desmond with kind eyes and a laugh that filled the whole room. "Afternoon, Mrs. Wynn," he said, recognizing me before I'd even reached the desk. "Here to see Julian?" "Surprise lunch," I said, lifting the bag like evidence of my good intentions. Desmond's smile faltered. Not much, just a flicker, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't already looking for reasons to worry. But I wasn't looking for anything yet. I was still, in that last unbroken moment, only a wife with a sandwich and a plan. "Let me just call up," he said, reaching for the phone with a carefulness that, only later, I would understand as mercy. Desmond dialed an extension, murmured something I couldn't hear, and hung up with an odd, apologetic softness. "He's in a meeting, sweetheart. Should be done in 20 minutes or so. You want to wait?" I said I didn't mind. I sat on the leather bench near the elevators, the sandwich bag on my knees, watching the lobby's slow choreography. Badges swiping, elevators chiming, strangers moving through their ordinary Tuesdays. Desmond kept glancing my way, and finally, when the silence between us had stretched long enough to feel deliberate, he cleared his throat. "You know," he said, trying for lightness and missing it slightly, "it's nice to actually meet you. I mean, properly meet you." "We've met before," I said, confused. "The holiday party. I brought his laptop that one time." Right. He nodded too quickly. "I just meant, I see his wife every day, practically. Comes by most lunchtimes. Didn't realize there were 2 of you bringing him sandwiches." He laughed, an easy, unthinking laugh, the kind men use to fill silence rather than to express joy. I laughed too, out of reflex, the way you laugh at a joke a half-second before you understand it isn't one. "I'm sorry," I said. "What did you say?" Desmond's laugh caught in his throat. I watched something shift behind his eyes, the recognition of a mistake, arriving a full sentence too late. "I just meant, you know, I probably mixed him up with someone. We get a lot of folks through here." But he hadn't mixed anyone up. I could see it in the way his hand drifted, unconsciously, toward the visitor log on the desk, then stopped itself, guilty. I could see it in the too careful way he was suddenly refusing to meet my eyes. "Desmond," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt, "who comes by every day." "I really think I've got my wires crossed, Mrs. Wynn. Please." He looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look people give you right before they decide whether to protect you or the truth. Then he sighed and turned the visitor log so I could see it, his finger resting beneath a name signed in careful, familiar handwriting, dated that very morning, and the morning before that, and the morning before that. Priya Wynn. Not my name. Never my name. And yet there it was, claimed, repeated, worn smooth by habit. A name that belonged, apparently, to someone else's ordinary Tuesday with my husband. I don't remember leaving the building. I remember the sandwich bag, still in my hand, absurdly intact, as though the world hadn't just tilted sideways. I remember Desmond saying my name, gently, twice, and me saying I was fine, in the automatic way people say things they don't yet believe. I walked instead of taking the train. 40 minutes, maybe longer, through streets I'd walked 100 times before, except now, everything looked slightly wrong, like a photograph developed with the colors shifted half a degree. I kept turning the name over in my mind, Priya Wynn, testing its weight, trying to make it mean something other than what it obviously meant. There were explanations, I told myself. A coworker who shared his last name by strange coincidence. A clerical error, a guard's careless assumption repeated, so often it calcified into fact. I built each excuse carefully, the way you build a bridge over water you're afraid to look down into, and each one collapsed before I reached the other side. At home, I sat at the kitchen table where I'd packed the sandwiches that morning, and I made myself still. Not calm, I want to be honest about that, but still, in the way an animal goes still before it decides whether to run or fight. I thought about the small things I'd never questioned. The phone he sometimes left face down. The Tuesday and Thursday client lunches he never described in detail. The new habit, these past several months, of taking calls in the hallway with the door mostly closed. I thought about how easily a life can run in two directions at once, if no one is looking closely enough to notice the seams. I did not cry, not yet. I understand now that what I felt in that hour wasn't sadness. Sadness would come later, in smaller, more manageable doses. What I felt was a kind of falling, slow and total, the particular vertigo of realizing that the floor you've been standing on was never as solid as you believed. When Julian came home that evening, kissed my cheek, and asked what was for dinner, I told him I wasn't feeling well. I watched him move through our kitchen with the same unhurried ease he always had, and I understood, with a clarity that frightened me, that I was looking at a stranger, wearing a familiar face. I did not confront him. Not that night. I wanted first to understand exactly what I was looking at. The following days unfolded like a film played at the wrong speed, too slow in the mornings, unbearably fast by evening, when Julian would walk through the door, and I would have to remember how to arrange my face into something ordinary. I am, by nature, a patient person. It is the quality that has served me best and cost me most. In my work, I've spent years learning to read a record for what it doesn't say as much as what it does. The gaps, the inconsistencies, the places where a story has been quietly edited. I decided somewhere in that long, sleepless week to apply the same discipline to my own life. I began carefully to look. It wasn't difficult, once I knew where to look. A second phone bill, addressed to an apartment I didn't recognize, folded inside a jacket I was taking to the dry cleaner. A calendar app, synced across our shared tablet, that showed recurring appointments labeled only with initials. Pete, W, lunch. A photograph, buried 3 folders deep in a cloud album, of Julian at a birthday dinner I had never attended, his arm around a woman with a soft, easy smile, a cake between them that read, in careful icing script, Happy Anniversary. 2 years, the cake said. 2 years of an anniversary that was not mine. I sat with that photograph a long time. I noted, almost clinically, that I felt no urge toward the things people expect in these moments, no impulse to shatter dishes, no desire to scream his name down an empty hallway. What I felt instead was a terrible, quiet clarity, the kind that comes when a puzzle you've been avoiding finally, unwillingly, completes itself. I thought about my mother, who had discovered a similar betrayal when I was 12, and who had responded by burning her husband's belongings on the back porch while the neighbors watched. I remembered how small she'd looked afterward, how the town had talked about her rage far longer than it had talked about his infidelity. I did not want that ending. I did not want to become the story people told about themselves at dinner parties. a cautionary tale about a woman undone by grief. I wanted the truth to be seen, not staged. I wanted it exposed in a way that left no room for him to rewrite it later, no way for him to make me the unstable one, the jealous one, the wife who couldn't be trusted with a simple misunderstanding. So, I did not confront him yet. I gathered. There is a particular kind of strength in patience that people rarely credit because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look like courage. It looks, from the outside, like nothing at all, like a woman going about her ordinary week, cooking dinner, asking about his day, laughing at his jokes with only the faintest tightness around her eyes. But underneath, I was building something. Every record I'd ever cataloged had taught me that truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be assembled, piece by piece, until it can no longer be denied. I found the second apartment first, a modest one-bedroom 11 blocks from his office, leased under both their names, the paperwork tucked inside a filing cabinet he thought I never opened. I found the shared bank account, small deposits made monthly, patient as a heartbeat. I found, eventually, the truth of how it had started. Priya, a project coordinator at his firm, introduced to him 2 years ago on a work trip neither of us had thought twice about at the time. I did not confront Priya. I felt, oddly, no anger toward her, only a distant, aching curiosity about what she believed she had. Did she know about me? Had he told her some version of our marriage already ending, already hollow, the kind of lie that lets a person feel like the exception rather than the accomplice? I would never know for certain, and I made peace, slowly, with not needing to. What I needed was undeniable proof, arranged with the same care I gave every record at work, dated, cross-referenced, impossible to argue with. I photographed documents. I saved messages. I spoke, once, carefully, to a mutual friend from the firm's holiday party, framing my questions so gently that she never suspected what she was confirming. I remember standing in our bedroom one night, Julian asleep beside me, unaware that the woman he thought he knew completely had spent the evening building a case against the life he'd constructed behind her back. I felt, in that moment, less like a wounded wife and more like an archivist closing in on the final page of a very long, very careful file. I was not building this to destroy him. I want that understood. I was building it so that when the truth finally surfaced, it would surface whole, undeniable, unshaped by his explanations, incapable of being softened into a story where I was simply overreacting. I chose a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the sandwich bag and the visitor log, 3 weeks after Desmond's careless, kind laugh had cracked my life open. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I made tea, an absurd, deliberate act of composure, and set a folder on the kitchen table between us, the same table where I'd packed his lunch on the morning everything began. I know about Priya, I said. I know about the apartment on Delancey. I know about the anniversary dinner 2 months ago, and the account you've been depositing into since March of last year. Julian went very still, the particular stillness of a man watching a structure he'd assumed was permanent begin, silently, to fall. He tried, at first, to minimize "it's not what it looks like," the oldest sentence in the language of betrayal. But the folder sat between us, patient and complete, and eventually, the way water eventually wins against stone, he stopped arguing with what could not be argued with. I did not ask him to justify it. I found, in that room, that I no longer needed his reasons. I had spent 3 weeks understanding the shape of what he'd done. I did not need him to narrate the why. What I needed, and what I finally allowed myself, was to speak. "I'm not going to scream at you," I said. "I'm not going to call her, or your mother, or post this somewhere for an audience. I don't need an audience to know what's true. I only need you to hear it once clearly from me. I gave you 3 years of an honest life, and you gave me 2 of them back as a lie." He reached for my hand. I let him hold it for exactly as long as it took to say what came next. "I want a divorce. I've already spoken to an attorney. The paperwork will be ready by Monday." He asked, quietly, almost pleadingly, if there was any version of this where we tried again. I looked at him for a long moment, searching myself honestly for an answer, and found only stillness where doubt might once have lived. "No," I said. "Not because I hate you. Because I finally understand what I deserve, and it isn't a marriage I have to investigate to believe in. The room stayed quiet. No raised voices, no shattered dishes. Only the particular, exhausted piece of a truth finally spoken aloud, taking up exactly as much space as it needed and no more. The months that followed were not cinematic. There was no single dramatic scene where the truth detonated across our shared world. Instead, there was paperwork and silence and the slow, unglamorous work of dividing a life into two separate ones. I moved into a smaller apartment near the park, the kind of place with good light and a radiator that clanked companionably at night. I kept the bookshelf. He kept the dining table neither of us had ever really liked. Word moved through our small circle of friends the way it always does. Not from me, since I never told the story to be believed, only to be free of it, but from the quiet arithmetic of two people no longer appearing together at the places they once had. I heard secondhand that Julian and Priya moved in together within the year. I felt, when I heard it, small, surprising ache, not for him, but for the version of my own life I'd once imagined we were building. Grief, I learned, doesn't always arrive as a single wave. Sometimes it arrives as an aftertaste, faint and unbidden, months after you thought you'd already finished tasting it. Desmond called me once, that autumn, to apologize genuinely, awkwardly, for the laugh that had started it all. I told him he had nothing to apologize for. He had, without meaning to, handed me the one thing my carefully alphabetized husband had never intended to give me: the truth. I returned to my work at the nonprofit with a strange new tenderness for the records I cataloged, other people's histories, their gaps and revisions, their quiet edits. I understood them differently now, having lived, briefly, inside a story someone else had tried to rewrite around me. I did not become bitter. I want to be honest about how close I came, some nights, to letting bitterness in, how easy it would have been to let this be the story that defined every year that came after. But I had built my case not from rage, but from a need to see clearly, and that same clarity, I found, could be turned forward as easily as it had been turned back. Slowly, the ache became something quieter. Not forgiveness, exactly. Something more like release. It is a year later now, almost to the week. I no longer live near that 14-story building with its tinted glass and hushed marble lobby, though I passed it once, by accident, on my way to a friend's office nearby. I stood across the street for a moment, watching people move through revolving doors into their ordinary Tuesdays, and I felt nothing sharp at all, only a distant, settled recognition, the way you might look at a photograph of a house you used to live in. I think sometimes of that first day, the sandwich bag, the light through the kitchen window, the small softness in my chest that made me want to surprise him. I don't regret that softness. I think it's important, still, to be the kind of person who packs a lunch on instinct, who believes in small kindnesses even when the world hasn't yet shown its hand. I refused to let one man's dishonesty convince me that my own tenderness was foolish. Desmond still works the front desk of that building. I ran into him last spring, and he told me, smiling, that a new receptionist had started asking after the other Mrs. Wynn, and that he'd finally, gently, corrected the record. I liked that image, the record, finally accurate, finally whole. I've learned, in the years since, that dignity doesn't need to be loud to be real. It doesn't need witnesses or applause, or a single dramatic scene where the truth arrives with thunder. Sometimes it looks like a folder on a kitchen table. Sometimes it looks like tea, made carefully, while your whole life quietly rearranges itself into something you can finally trust. I am 26 now. I have a new apartment, a new rhythm to my mornings, a new appreciation for the particular piece of a life that doesn't require investigation to believe in. I still make sandwiches sometimes, cut on the diagonal, though now they're only ever for myself, and I've found, unexpectedly, that they taste exactly the same. The guard laughed that day without meaning any harm. He couldn't have known he was handing me the truth. But I think if I ever see him again, I'll thank him, not for the laugh itself, but for what it revealed, that even the smallest, most careless moment can be the one that finally sets you free.